Hi guys, we've got some parts. Let's get this old thing back up and running. Here's our selection of parts. We've got the shift dog for the lower unit. This outboard had issues the last time it was in the water with staying in gear, and we took it apart, I remember, and the shift dog was worn out. We've got a carburetor kit with a float, genuine BRP. We've got a fuel pump, unfortunately not genuine BRP, but it actually doesn't look too bad, so hopefully it'll be a good one. We've got a genuine BRP water pump. However, looking at that, I don't know if that's used or why it's got that kind of gold color to it. It's kind of weird. We've got an aftermarket lower unit seal kit. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find the genuine BRP one, so we've had to make do with an aftermarket. Hopefully these seals work out all right. Definitely better than what is in it right now, because the lower unit leaks pretty bad. I'm not sure if I'm going to get all these parts installed in this video or not. We'll see how long the video goes. We'll make some progress and see how far we get. Let me get set up and we'll start putting some parts in. First item we're going to try and change is the fuel pump. Now, I don't know that the fuel pump doesn't work, but given that the motor has been sitting in a junk heap for, the last 30 years, I think it's probably a pretty good guess. I don't know if you guys have seen pliers like this. No idea where I got them from, but they're for doing clip rings. We've got both those clip rings pulled back. Let me grab a flat blade screwdriver. We'll see if we can get in there and get that off. Yeah, we're gonna have to get some fresh fuel line. The fuel lines here are pretty crispy, but I'll have to run to the part store tomorrow after work and pick those up. I don't know that this fuel pump has ever been changed on this motor. I definitely have never changed it myself, but I didn't run it for that many years. When I was a kid, I had a 9.8 Merc that I ran because on the 14-foot skiff that we had, this was a pretty hot motor for a young teenager to be running on the lake by himself. So the 9.8 did a good job for what I needed it to do. This was Dad's motor. It popped off. Well, those fuel lines are definitely stiff and definitely need to be replaced. But you know what? I think I'll just hook them up for now. We'll get some new ones and we'll replace that as a separate step. Now, one thing I noticed, now this cap we can turn around. That's not a problem. It's just a screen. We can back the thumb screw off and change it to whatever direction we need. But notice that something's kind of opposite. Now, maybe this piece here is just in the reverse direction. Possibly that's something that's reversible. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. We'll be making the hose shorter. It'll be closer to the carburetor. So having it coming out at the front instead of at the back, I don't think is a big deal. One problem I do see, those are not the same thread. Definitely those are not going to thread into this block, but we've got the old one, so that's not a problem. I do, however, see what is going to be a problem. This boss is thicker than the old fuel pump. Compare these two. That is the gasket, and you can see that the new one is quite a bit thicker. Wouldn't be a problem if the screws were correct, but that's not going to work. However, I do have some similar size stainless hardware kicking around. Perhaps I can find something in my stash of stainless hardware that will be long enough to fit through that fuel pump. Well, admittedly, this stainless screw seems quite a bit on the long side, but once you thread it into the block, it actually looks like it should do a pretty decent job. This is the incorrect thread new one, and this is the screw that I found. I'll have to see if I can find another one. Definitely looks like it's going to work. I found 2 stainless screws. That should work. We'll start threading it onto the gasket here. When I get this close to being seated, I'm going to put a little bit of the gasket sealing compound around there. I know watching Brandon's garage, where he works on a lot of OMC, older OMC outboards, he puts the gasket sealing compound on just about everything, and seems to work for him, so we'll do it too. You can't get the Evinrude gasket sealing compound anymore, but I was on a forum, I don't know, a year or so ago, and what they said is essentially this is the same stuff, just the Evinrude puts its own or used to put its own label on and sell it as a BRP product. So this will work quite nicely. It's a gasket compound, but it doesn't really seal up solid, and also it gets used as a never seize type of thread lubricant as well. Given that we're going to be putting stainless steel into aluminum, I think we probably want to put some form of never seize on there in case we ever have to work on this thing again. I don't know how well that'll show up, but I got a little bit on the inside there. I don't want to put too much because I don't want to plug the backside of the pump with what amounts to a molasses in January. And once again, we'll put a little bit on the backside that goes up against the block. Got some on the backside, and I also put just a little bit on the threads. We don't want to make a big mess. And we'll do the main feed line once we get everything kind of put together in here. Or maybe we'll do it now, because it's in the way. You can see on the back side, nice little screen. This is the main inlet for fuel coming from the tank, so that'll help keep some of the garbage out of the fuel pump. The gasket is being difficult. The holes in the gasket kind of threaded on. Now that the gasket is tight against the body of the fuel pump, it's acting almost like a nut and preventing us from tightening anymore. But okay, we got those holes augered out in the gasket, so it's not going to act like a nut anymore. And now we'll try and get this in here. The big screwdriver really doesn't like fitting down in there, and having the longer screws than what was factory is not helping any. Let me grab a little smaller screwdriver and see if that'll work better. Eventually I'll be able to get this little thing in there, but we're still a ½ inch away from doing that. Try this slightly smaller screwdriver. Seems to be working. Well, seems to be snug down. Take our fuel screen, put it back on. I think I'm going to put it in the fuel hose first. Seems to fit. Now, these snap ring pliers are fantastic for grabbing onto that style of barb, but unfortunately they're just a little on the large side for this style. I'm going to have to grab a standard pair of pliers to get in there to squeeze that back up onto the barb of the fuel pump. There we are. Step number 1 is done. The fuel pump is replaced. I think we're going to go on to the carburetor next. Hopefully that goes fairly well too. I'm hoping this carburetor is going to be reasonably decent shape when it comes apart. The last time this motor ran would have been before ethanol was really common in fuels, so we might get lucky. That would be really nice. Having the full carb kit though, of course, is bonus. I don't think it was that expensive. I forget what I paid for it. The choke lever's being a little cranky about coming off of there. It just can't quite get down far enough to clear this arm on the carburetor. So I'll take the ½ inch wrench and we'll back the carburetor off a little bit. And that should give us enough flex and everything to be able to get that choke lever out of there. Of course, there's not enough room to get the nuts all the way off, but we can loosen things up. And there we are, loose. back these nuts the rest of the way off. Hopefully be able to get the throttle to disconnect easily. Don't want to lose these down into the base of the engine, because they could fall down through to the exhaust housing, and that could be a bit of a annoyance to get out of there. The easy way to undo this would have been to undo this screw and just slide these two apart, but that kind of sets your throttle, how far your throttle opens and how far it closes. So popping it out of the fitting, I think, is the better way to go. Once again, we've got a little spring clip back on this back side. Exact same thing we saw on the fuel pump. And we'll try out my trusty new fuel line pliers. I picked these up, oh, I don't know, a month or so ago at Harbor Freight in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And they're hard to find. They're just basically a pair of needle nose pliers that have been bent into a loop so they can grab onto a fuel line. As you can see. Let me clean up the work table, and I'll take you guys over there and set you up so that we can tear this apart and see what kind of shape it's in. I'll give this just a little bit of a wipe down, try and get the worst of the grunge off of it. This is just a parts cleaner. Worst of the grunge off. Crack the float bowl off of here. We'll see what kind of shape it looks like in there. If things aren't too terribly dirty, I don't know if we need to necessarily dig into this too deep. As I say, the last time this motor ran would have been prior to the ethanol scourge. So I can't say. I don't know whether there's any ethanol fuel in this or not. Like spotless, absolutely spotless. Float level looks good. I don't know whether you guys can see that or not, but basically what you want is when your needle and seat are closed, like they are now with the float sitting this direction, you want the float to be parallel with the body of the carburetor. And you know, optical illusion from the lens might be showing that it's not quite that way, but I can assure you that, you know what? Just a little tweak, just the slightest little tweak. I hope this is almost like a foam float that's in here. Hopefully it's not all plugged with or saturated in fuel. We'll see if I can get this emulsifier tube to come out of here without damaging anything. It doesn't feel like it wants to come. Everything looks spotless. We're seated. The needle is seated all the way in, and most carburetors do 1.5 turns. So unfortunately, this one is not super easy to see. So put a little scratch in the brass there. So there's 1.5. That should be pretty close. Well, admittedly, this base gasket is a little bit crispy, probably a little crispier than I might like, but I want to keep that carburetor kit kind of as a second chance. If this doesn't work, then we've got the carburetor kit we can put in. If it does work, then we're good. Take some compressed air. I haven't got this cranked up full. Well, I do see one problem. The needle, when I blow air in where the fuel comes in, is not popping back down. So we've got to pop the float out of here. There's probably just a little bit of sticky on the bottom of that needle. You'll see we've got a soft tip on the needle, and we've got a hard tip in the seat. I don't know whether the camera can pick that up or not, but down there is a brass seat, so we've got a soft tip. One or the other should be soft. That seat doesn't want to come out of there. Given how clean the carburetor is, I don't want to force it. And now we're getting air coming out through there good. Now we got a plastic hinge pin. That surprises me. I don't know whether that's original or whether this carburetor has been massaged at some point in its life. Okay, the seat is now free. So I'm glad we took this apart. Definitely that would have caused us issues. And putting this back together, we got to make sure that this port lines up over top of this hole. Otherwise, no fuel would flow. That would be grumpy inducing. We don't need grumpy inducing. Since I'm reusing the original gasket here, I'm going to put some gasket goo on it here. I don't want to put too much on, and this stuff it goes everywhere. Like you can see, there's a great big gob. That's probably enough to do the entire. There's one side done. Of course, it's probably the wrong side. Oh no, it's the right side. I'll put a little bit on the back. Okay, that will hopefully hold everything together. And just a little bit on each of these screws to act as a never seize in case we ever have to take it apart. Which we probably will, because all gasoline nowadays has ethanol in it pretty well. So what I'm doing here is I'm blowing into this and blowing into the fuel inlet, and when I do that, I can tell in this direction that the float is closed. Essentially, the float is acting like it's being suspended by fuel, and it's up as high as it'll go. We're not getting any flow. When I flip it over and blow up through it, we're getting a little bit of flow, so that tells me that the float is moving in there. So that's good. Let's get a little bit of gasket goo on the base carburetor base gasket here. I don't know, I probably should be changing the all the seals in the carburetor, but everything looks so clean, I don't see that there's a whole lot of point. Hopefully it runs properly. Let me move you guys back over to the motor and we'll get things put back together. Hopefully that's a good angle for you. We've got our base gasket. We've got our fuel inlet, which surprisingly seems to go on fairly well. Get a pair of pliers on that. Wipe some of the grunge out of there. Now the throttle attaches back to the lever that's driven off of the spark advance. We've got our lock washer and our nut. These started on. Same for the other side. Now I don't want to crank this down too hard yet. We've still got to put that front fascia back in place that has the choke arm in it. And I'm guessing this is some kind of silencer type of thing, absorbs some spitting out of the carburetor, because definitely there's a 3/4 inch air gap between the this foam cartridge and the front of the carburetor. So definitely it's not an air filter, and I don't think you're going to find air filters in marine applications too often. Give the choke arm a little bit of a wipe down, get the worst of the grunge off of it, and we'll feed it back in. So now we are, for the most part, reassembled. We'll tighten this back down. I'm going to put a little bit of that gasket glue on here just so that it works like a never sees. Well guys, I think we're going to end it there. Starting to have battery issues with cameras, etc., and it is getting a little bit late here. This is a good stopping off point because our next projects are going to be digging into the lower unit, and that's kind of a video unto itself. For curiosity's sake, this is an 18 horse outboard, as we've discussed in past videos, and OMC used basically the same power head for 18 horse, 20 horse, and 25 horse, I think, in this year. And I believe as the 70s progressed, I think you could even get up to a 30 horse that was essentially the same block. And what I could do if I wanted to turn this into a 25 horse is get a 25 horse intake manifold from the same year and carburetor and install it on this exact same block. Would probably have to install a new propeller as well, different pitch, but could easily take this motor from being an 18 horse up to 25. However, we're already stretching what my boat is capable of. My boat's designed for a maximum 15 horsepower, and we're going to be putting an 18 horse on it. So do I really need to go to 25 horse? Not at all. I think we're going to end it here. Thanks a lot for stopping by, checking out this video. Greatly appreciated. Can you give me a thumbs up if you got this far in the video? And hey, if you want to see more great content from Doug's Messy Garage, why don't you throw me a subscribe, ring that bell icon so you get notified when I put new stuff up. And we'll catch you in the next mess.